Have you ever wondered why we're so bad at predicting what will make us happy in the future? Picture this. You've just landed your dream job, the one you've been working towards for years. You're certain this is going to be the key to your happiness and fulfillment. Fast forward 6 months and you're sitting at your desk feeling, well, not quite as ecstatic as you imagined. Sound familiar? Welcome to CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf, where we dive into the most impactful books shaping industries and driving innovation. I'm your host, and today we're exploring a book that challenges everything we think we know about happiness and decision-making. Get ready to have your mind blown as we delve into Stumbling on Happiness by Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert. Before we dive in, let me give you a quick overview of what to expect. We'll be exploring 3 key areas from Gilbert's groundbreaking work: the illusion of foresight, the power of the present, and what Gilbert calls our psychological immune system. Along the way, I'll be sharing some personal stories, fascinating studies, and practical tips that you can apply to your business and personal life. So whether you're a seasoned CEO or an aspiring entrepreneur, buckle up. This episode is about to turn your commute into a mini-MBA session. Let's start with the illusion of foresight. You know that feeling when you're absolutely certain about how a future event will play out? Maybe it's a product launch, a merger, or even something in your personal life like a vacation. Well, Gilbert argues that our ability to predict our future emotions is far less accurate than we think. Here's a story that illustrates this perfectly. A few years ago, I was certain that moving to a bigger city would be the key to my happiness. I imagined the excitement of city life, the networking opportunities, the cultural experiences. I was so sure that this move would be transformative. But guess what? 6 months after the move, I found myself longing for the quieter life I'd left behind. The reality of city living, the noise, the traffic, the constant hustle was far different from what I'd imagined. Gilbert explains that this disconnect happens because our brains are incredibly adept at filling in gaps when we imagine the future. We create these detailed mental movies of future events, but they're often missing crucial details that will impact our actual experience. Let me share a fascinating study from the book that really drives this point home. Gilbert and his colleagues conducted an experiment with college students. They asked these students to predict how they would feel a few days after their school's football team played a game against its arch-rival. The results were eye-opening. The students consistently overestimated the duration of the game's emotional impact. Why? Because when they tried to imagine their future experience, they focused solely on the game itself. They pictured their team winning, storming the field, the cheers of the crowd, but they failed to imagine what they would be doing afterward, studying for exams, dealing with relationship issues, or worrying about their future careers. This tendency to focus on one aspect of a future event while ignoring others is something Gilbert calls focalism. And it's not just college students who fall into this trap. As business leaders, we do this all the time. Think about the last time you were excited about a new project or initiative. Did you focus primarily on the potential positive outcomes while overlooking potential challenges or day-to-day realities? I know I've done this countless times. For example, when I launched my first startup, I was so focused on the excitement of being my own boss and the potential for success that I completely underestimated the stress of managing employees, dealing with cash flow issues, and the sheer amount of time I'd need to invest. If I had taken a more balanced view, considering both the highs and the lows, I might have been better prepared for the reality of entrepreneurship. So, how can we overcome this illusion of foresight? Gilbert suggests one powerful strategy. Instead of relying solely on our imagination, we should consult others who have been in similar situations. This is where the power of mentorship and networking really comes into play. Here's an actionable tip for you. The next time you're facing a big decision, whether it's expanding into a new market, implementing a new technology, or even making a career move, reach out to at least 3 people who have been through similar experiences. Ask them not just about the outcomes, but about their day-to-day experiences, the challenges they faced, and how they felt throughout the process. By gathering this real-world data, you'll be able to create a more accurate picture of what to expect, helping you make more informed decisions and set more realistic expectations. Now let's move on to our second key area, the power of the present. Gilbert argues that our current state has a much bigger influence on our predictions of future happiness than we realize. This phenomenon is known as presentism, and it can significantly impact our decision-making processes. Let me share a personal experience that illustrates this concept perfectly. A few years ago, I was considering taking on a high-pressure, high-stakes project at work. The timing couldn't have been worse. I was in the middle of a stressful period, dealing with some personal issues, and feeling generally overwhelmed. When I tried to imagine how I'd feel taking on this new project, all I could picture was more stress and anxiety. I was this close to turning it down. But then, something interesting happened. I took a week off, got some rest, and spent time with family. When I returned to work, feeling refreshed and energized, I looked at the project again. Suddenly it didn't seem so daunting. In fact, I started to see it as an exciting challenge and a growth opportunity. Same project, same me, but a completely different perspective based on my current state. This is exactly what Gilbert talks about in Stumbling on Happiness. Our predictions about future feelings are heavily influenced by how we feel in the present moment. It's like we're wearing colored glasses that tint everything we look at, including our view of the future. Gilbert and his colleagues demonstrated this effect in a clever study involving food. They asked volunteers to predict how much they would enjoy eating a particular food the next day. Some of the volunteers made this prediction when they were hungry, others when they were full. The results were striking. Hungry volunteers consistently predicted they would enjoy the food more than those who were already full. But here's the kicker. When they actually ate the food the next day, their level of enjoyment had little to do with how hungry they'd been when making the prediction. Their current state had colored their view of the future, leading to inaccurate predictions. Now think about how this plays out in the business world. Have you ever made a major decision during a particularly stressful or difficult time? Maybe you decided to pull the plug on a project when you were feeling discouraged, or perhaps you committed to an aggressive expansion plan during a period of unusual success. I remember a time when my company was going through a rough patch. Sales were down, morale was low, and I was feeling pretty pessimistic about our future. In that state of mind, I seriously considered selling the business. I couldn't imagine things ever improving. Luckily, a trusted advisor suggested I take some time to think it over. A few weeks later, after we'd had a small win and things were looking up, I revisited the decision. I realized that my gloomy outlook had been coloring my view of the entire future of the company. So how can we guard against this presentism bias? Gilbert suggests creating what I like to call a cooling off period before making important choices. Here's an actionable tip. Implement a 24-hour rule for major decisions. When you're about to make a significant choice, especially if you're in a heightened emotional state, whether positive or negative, commit to waiting 24 hours before finalizing your decision. During this cooling off period, try to expose yourself to a variety of experiences and emotions. Go for a walk, talk to different people, engage in an activity you enjoy. This can help balance out the influence of your current state and give you a more nuanced perspective. Additionally, try to gather data about your decision from different emotional states. Keep a decision journal where you write down your thoughts about the choice when you're feeling different ways: stressed, relaxed, excited, worried. This can give you a more comprehensive view of the situation and help you make a more balanced decision. Now let's explore the third key area from Gilbert's book, the psychological immune system. This is a fascinating concept that explains why we're often more resilient than we expect to be when facing negative events. Gilbert argues that we have a kind of psychological immune system that helps us cope with adversity. Just like our physical immune system protects us from disease, our psychological immune system protects us from excessive unhappiness. It kicks in when we experience negative events, helping us to rationalize, contextualize, and ultimately come to terms with what's happened. Let me share a personal story that illustrates this concept. Early in my career, I was passed over for a promotion that I thought I was a shoo-in for. I was devastated. I remember thinking, this is going to affect my whole career. I'll never recover from this setback. I predicted that I'd be unhappy for months, maybe even years. But you know what? That's not what happened at all. Within a few weeks, I started to see the situation differently. I told myself, maybe I wasn't ready for that role yet. This gives me more time to develop my skills. I even started to see some benefits to staying in my current position a bit longer. My psychological immune system had kicked in, helping me to find the silver lining in what I had initially seen as a catastrophic event. This ability to bounce back and find meaning in negative events is something Gilbert and his colleagues have studied extensively. In one particularly interesting study, they looked at how people react to not getting a job they interviewed for. They asked participants to predict how they would feel if they didn't get the job, and then followed up with them after the actual decision was made. What they found was remarkable. People who didn't get the job felt much better than they had predicted they would. Their psychological immune systems had gone to work, helping them rationalize the outcome. It wasn't the right fit anyway. Find alternative explanations. Maybe it was just really competitive. And even see potential benefits. Now I can explore other opportunities I was overlooking. This research has profound implications for how we approach risk and failure in business. Often, we shy away from taking risks because we overestimate how bad we'll feel if things don't work out. We imagine that a failed project or a rejected proposal will be devastating. But Gilbert's work suggests that we're more resilient than we give ourselves credit for. Think about a time when you faced a significant setback in your business. Maybe a major client dropped you, a product launch flopped, or you had to lay off employees. In the moment, it probably felt like the end of the world. But if you reflect on it now, you'll likely realize that you recovered faster and more completely than you expected. I remember when my company's first major product failed spectacularly. We had invested a huge amount of time and resources into it, and when it flopped, I thought it was the end of the road for us. I predicted that morale would plummet, we'd lose key team members, and we might even have to shut down the business, but that's not what happened. Yes, it was a tough period, but our team rallied, we analyzed what went wrong, learned valuable lessons, and used that knowledge to inform our next product, which turned out to be a big success. Looking back, that failure was actually a critical turning point for our company's growth and development. So how can we use this knowledge of our psychological immune system to our advantage? Here's an actionable tip. Start practicing what I call resilience visualization. When you're considering taking a risk or making a big decision, don't just visualize success. Also, visualize a scenario where things don't go as planned. But instead of focusing on the negative feelings, imagine how you might respond positively. How might you learn from the experience? What new opportunities might it open up? By recognizing our capacity for resilience, we can become more comfortable with taking calculated risks. This doesn't mean being reckless, but it does mean understanding that even if things don't go as planned, we have the internal resources to cope and potentially turn the situation to our advantage. Moreover, as leaders, understanding the psychological immune system can help us better support our teams through challenges. Instead of trying to shield your team from every possible setback, focus on fostering an environment where failure is seen as a learning opportunity. Encourage open discussion of mistakes and setbacks and highlight examples of how the team or individuals have bounced back from past challenges. As we wrap up our exploration of stumbling on happiness, let's recap the key insights we've discovered. First, we learned about the illusion of foresight, how our brains fill in gaps when imagining the future, often leading to inaccurate predictions about how we'll feel. Remember, consulting others who have been through similar experiences can help us create a more accurate picture of what to expect. Second, we explored the power of the present, how our current emotional state colors our view of the future. By implementing a cooling-off period for major decisions, we can mitigate the impact of temporary emotions on long-term choices. Finally, we delved into the concept of the psychological immune system, our mind's remarkable ability to help us cope with and find meaning in negative events. By recognizing our capacity for resilience, we can approach risks and challenges with more confidence. These insights from Gilbert's work have profound implications for how we make decisions, both in business and in our personal lives. By understanding these cognitive biases and psychological mechanisms, we can make more informed choices, set more realistic expectations, and navigate challenges more effectively. I encourage you all to take some time to reflect on how these concepts apply to your own life and business. Are there areas where you might be falling into the trap of mispredicting your future happiness? How might you use the knowledge of your psychological immune system to approach risks differently? Remember, the goal isn't to achieve perfect foresight. That's simply not possible. Instead, it's about developing a more nuanced, realistic approach to thinking about the future and making decisions. By doing so, we can not only stumble less on our path to happiness, but also create more sustainable, fulfilling businesses and lives. Before we go, I want to remind you that you can find a link to Stumbling on Happiness by Daniel Gilbert in this episode's description. I highly recommend giving it a read. There's so much more depth and fascinating research in the book that we couldn't cover in this episode. And thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most thought-provoking books in the CEO's library. If you found this episode valuable, please share it with a friend or colleague who might benefit from these insights. And don't forget to subscribe to CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf, so you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, and remember, the key to success might just be understanding the quirks of your own mind.